So I rolled for what beverage to buy on the way over here. I wanted a root beer, but I rolled for this Faygo Twist lemon lime, and it's actually quite delicious.
What were the combatants?
So I chose the 6 in the one case that had the root beer that I was looking at. I chose the root beer and then 5 others that were on the shelves that I thought were like the most desirable. Mm-hmm. And then I rolled for which one to get. And often when that happens, if you have something in mind that you want, you're going to get something else probably, chances are.
Well, chances are 1 in 6.
And sometimes that's great because it gets you out of the tyranny of your own thinking.
Right. Patterns.
Because if you only think in your own thoughts, the brain is a very habitual creature and you get into ruts, which is one of the reasons why making decisions randomly can break you out of your routine. Welcome to Your Aleatoric Reality, the podcast that invites you to make decisions by rolling dice. If you are a listener and you like the show, please do give us a glowing 5-star review on your platform of choice. And if you do not like the show, please contact us privately to give us your notes and tell us how we can improve for you, the listener, because we want to make it better for you. We really do.
Constructive criticism is always appreciated.
Always welcome, yes. And you can email us at youraleatoricreality@gmail.com anytime. We'd love to hear from you. So in the news, last time I talked about my friend who happened to be sitting next to me at a restaurant while I rolled for a menu choice, and he was like, oh, I'm going to try that. So he just texted me while I was on my way over here and said that he has made another choice with dice and then attached to that a picture of a menu at a restaurant.
Another menu item.
So right. So now, like, it's a great start. Now I've got to kind of guide him to the idea that, like, it's not just for menus. It's not just for restaurants. You can make other decisions this way.
Maybe those are the only decisions he has control of in his life.
It could be. I mean, he is a university professor and married with children under 10. So he may not have a lot of opportunity for dice madness,
Right.
But you gotta, like we were saying, you can't put stuff that you wouldn't do on the list. Like if I were at that convenience store and I was like, well, I'm going to put like 3 sodas and 3 bottles of wine. If I had rolled a bottle of wine, I wouldn't have actually bought it or drank it because I don't drink. So you can't list things that are not a real possibility for you.
Right. And also, like, if there's 32 different sodas in the case, when you've tried 7 of them that you don't like. You don't have to put them on the list. You don't have to always roll for everything.
Yeah.
Variety is the spice of life, but shit is shit.
Yeah, that's one of the big things I tell people. I mean, I have a list of the tenets of the Secret Masters of Random, which I think I may have mentioned on a previous episode, but I'm going to give you the rundown now, the abbreviated version. I have 6 principles that I try to apply to all of my dice decisions. A dice decision should be obligated. You should feel a real sense of resolve to do whatever it is before you roll. Because if you just roll and then decide, oh, no, I don't really like that choice, I'm going to roll again, or I'm going to pick something else, that's not random reality. That's just taking suggestions.
Best 2 out of 3.
If you want to really get into it, you resolve ahead of time, whatever the roll is, I'm going to do it. And that's why the principle number 4 is vital, and we'll get there. Principle number 1 is obligated. Principle number 2 is prescriptive. Prescriptive versus descriptive. And this isn't one everybody needs, but occasionally when I start showing people the dice life, they start asking questions about the future. Like, oh, will I get a new job? Or, is my sister is my sister's boyfriend gonna propose? And I'm like, it's not divination. Random reality is not divination. They're related, and on the divination episode, if we ever get to it, we will talk about that relationship. But when you're doing random reality, you're prescribing a course of action. You're not trying to get the dice to predict the future. It's a subtle philosophical distinction, but one that I think matters.
It's transposition of decision-making, not advice.
Right, exactly. So principle number 3 is actionable. Every choice on your list should be something that you can take positive action immediately. Like, and the main thing that this is against is the idea of like, oh, I really want another piece of cheesecake. Oh, but I shouldn't have 2 pieces of cheesecake. Oh, I really want it. I'm going to roll for whether or not to have it. That's a sucky roll because then you could, like, if you roll for not, well, what the fuck do I do now? There's nothing to do. Like, not doing something shouldn't be an option.
And again,
you could say, I'm going to, like, 1 to 2, I'm going to have the cheesecake. 3 to 4, I'm going to eat the rest of the cheesecake. 5 and 6, I'm going to go run around the block. Like, make every choice something that you can do.
Even that is kind of a sucky dice roll. I mean, it's not an advice column. It's not there to reinforce decisions you've already made. And it's not an excuse. It is a random decision-making tool.
Right. Well, we'll get to principle number 5 tempers that one as well. So we'll get to there. So number 4 is viable. So whereas in principle 3, actionable, it has to be something you can do right now. Principle 4, viable, it has to be something you are willing and theoretically able to do. So don't put, I'm going to go to the moon as an option.
Or, it's constructive. It's not a destructive option.
Elaborate.
Oh, you don't put things on there like, okay, I'm going to eat broken glass, or I'm going to eat pie, or I'm going to
yes, we want viable options that are going to not only like, oh, I can do it, but it shouldn't be something that's like you have to force yourself to do, or it's like a punishment. Yeah, don't do punishments on there. I mean, you can do like tasks that you have to get done. I think I talked about my
that's also
procrastination cure.
That's productivity. That is positive forward movement. Even if it's something you don't want to do, it's a methodology that allows you to be motivated to do something because you prescribe to this.
Exactly. All right, number 5, multiplex. And this is to avoid binary choices. You should always have at least 3 choices to get outside of binary thinking, like I'm going to do it or I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to have the Coke or the Pepsi. Like, get a little bit more creative. Give yourself at least 3 options. I'm going to have the cheesecake, I'm going to have another hot dog, or I'm going to go hit on that chick I've been looking at all night.
How do you feel about, let's say you only have 5 options and you want to use a D6. Is it okay to have the 6th option be re-roll?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
If you don't have the proper hardware for the choice, look, with a D6, you can easily do 3 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
If you have 4, you could re-roll on a 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
You can also, and this gets into controversial territory, I say you can change the odds too. If you're like, well, I really like these 2 options best, I'm going to give those 2 numbers each.
Yeah. Waiting.
And like 1 to 2 is eat the cheesecake, 3 to 4 is eat the pie, a 5 is go home, and a 6 is go hit on that chick because I'm really nervous. And I'd kind of rather the dice just let me eat cake instead of have to talk to a human being. That could happen. And principle number 6 is exogenous, which is a fancy word for ideas that didn't come from you. So you got suggestions from somebody else. Maybe you have somebody who's making a choice with you and you can each contribute a few of the options, or you heard something on the radio or like pick up a magazine and flip through it to get some, maybe not necessarily a direct idea, but some inspiration for an idea that you can put on the list. Because once again, if you only list things that you've thought of, you're not breaking outside of your brain chemistry.
Also, look in a magazine for ideas could be something on a list.
Exactly. Yeah. So get some exogenous choices in there. It doesn't have to be all of them, but get an idea or 2 that you didn't come up with, or is it kind of outside of your ordinary comfort zone. So the tenets of the Secret Masters of Random altogether are that your random choices should be obligated, prescriptive, actionable, viable, multiplex, and exogenous. And if you have anything to say about that or any questions, please email us at youraleatoricreality@gmail.com. That is the tenets of the Secret Masters of Random.
Now, that being said, and I feel a little remorse for making fun of your friend for using it for menu options, because I know when I go to a restaurant, I pretty much just get this thing I've had, which is the first thing I tried, which is the thing that I always get. And it is quite adventurous to roll the menu items, especially if you're rolling all the menu items.
That is quite adventurous. Yeah,
you know, but oftentimes you will, I mean, everybody knows this experience. You go to a restaurant, you sit down, you look at this thing, you read the description 15 times, you talk about it with whoever you're with, and then you don't get it. You just get the roast beef sandwich you always get, or whatever. And this is a good opportunity to push your boundaries. And it can be something as simple as a menu item, which is probably the most simple and practical use of this, or what movie to watch, or, so things like that. But also we're going to get into it in future episodes with using this as a creative tool to break down writer's block and other things like that, or, as a gateway into enhanced creativity.
Yeah.
And, you can take it as far as you want. Now, as discussed in the previous episode with the Dice Man, there are places you don't want to go with it.
For sure. Well, but on the other side of the coin, because, yes, it is adventurous. It gives you a more robust experience. It leads you to do things that you wouldn't have ordinarily done that might be very fulfilling. But on the other side of that coin, too, is how many times you go to a restaurant and you stare at the menu and you spend all this thought, thinking and worrying about, oh, what if I won't like it? Or, these both look good. I'm not sure which one to get. And you're in this struggle state. And are you going to remember next week which menu item? Is it going to matter a year from now which menu item you ordered? It doesn't matter at all.
And what's the worst thing that can happen? You order something and you don't like it, but you tried it. You tried something new, and that's always a good thing. And it's always good to be adventurous and try new things. Mm-hmm. But actually, while you're talking about that, it reminded me of a story, which was another alternate use of random reality. And it was about a decade ago. I was taking, for work, I had to take this ITIL test.
A what test?
ITIL.
What's that?
It's a methodology for help desk structures and stuff like that. And I forget what it fucking stands for. It's British. Anyway. Obviously, but the test.
I'm gonna just outright forbid the discussion of British acronyms on this show.
Anyway, so this exam was very hard to study for, and the test was notoriously tricky.
Uh-huh.
It's one of those where it's here's 5 options. 2 of them are a combination of the above answers, and then one of them is really close to the same as the answer next to it.
I hate those kind of tests.
And it's literally just bullshit gateway stuff where they're just trying to make sure that the test isn't considered easy.
Mm-hmm.
Because that puts some kind of bullshit value on it to business peoples. But so anyway, in a combination of aleatoric reality and outright mockery, and defiance, I brought a 20-sided die and a 4-sided die with me to take the exam.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to a question that I didn't know the answer to, or paused and stopped on it, I would roll a D4, because it was ABCD.
Mm-hmm.
I would roll a D4, and then I would roll a D20 with a 10, or a DC of 10, right? So if I roll the D4 and I got a 4, then it would be D, and then I roll the D20 to tell me if that was the right answer or not.
Uh-huh.
And this was just...
That's a bit of divination.
Yeah, but it was emphasis on the word mockery, because, one, I didn't fucking care.
Uh-huh.
Because because I knew this stuff inside and out, but you're going to trick me with some of these questions because you've spent a ton of time writing trick questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to fall for it some of the time. It's really funny in a room full of people taking an exam. I did pass the exam.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
See, random reality really does make anything better.
Well, I think it was because... I should
you only did that on questions that you didn't know for sure the answer.
And I also did it because a really good methodology for taking it to any test that's timed is if you don't know the answer, skip the question.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than skipping the question, I would divine the answer and mark it. And then once I had finished the exam, because also while taking an exam like this, sometimes the answer to a prior question is in a later question.
All right.
So I would go through, and instead of spending 5 minutes staring at a piece of paper and shitting my pants, I would just roll for it, mark it as a divination answer, and then move on. And then when I got to the end, if I had time left, then I went back and I reviewed my answers for divination. It doesn't adhere to all the modicums of your thingy there.
But Tenets.
Yeah.
Well, it was before they were created, so I can't fine you.
Well,
for
and this
that.
was before I even I'd met you or even thought of doing this as a life practice thing.
Right.
This was just something I came up with, as I said, mostly in mockery. But I did pass the exam. So anyway, that was just I knew I'd never shared that story with you, and it just popped into my head.
That's awesome. I wish I had the foresight to do that. I had this quiz, speaking of like questions that are designed to trick you. And there was this it was one of those integrity tests where they're like, is this person going to like rip us off if we hire them? And the one question, it stuck in my mind for years afterwards. It said, it's wrong to take drugs at work because it's illegal. And I stared at that question for a really long time. And I was like, well, if I say yes to this, am I saying it's only wrong because it's illegal? Like, if drugs were legal, would it be okay to take drugs at work?
What were the options?
Like, it really confused me.
Was it a yes or no question?
This was a one of those like strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree.
Oh, give me a fucking break.
And I was like, it's wrong to take drugs at work because it's illegal. Well, no, I don't agree, because even if it were legal, I don't think you should do it at work.
Right. Yeah.
And they have all these questions that are so stupidly worded that I'm like, I could think of justifiable reasons to answer this question either way, but you have one particular answer in mind, you fucking tricksy bastards.
So
test makers are probably the lowest rung of hell.
I don't want to go off on a tangent here about this, but I want to say I literally was having this conversation yesterday about how I find it extremely ignorant and obtuse for people to think that if something is illegal, it's absolutely bad, and if something is legal, it's absolutely good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, slavery was legal for a really long time.
Totally.
But it's never been good.
Right.
It was permitted, right?
Yeah.
And then, I would gladly have an argument about drugs and whether or not they should be illegal, because they shouldn't be illegal. Or some drugs are illegal if used for these things. It's like, I mean, it mostly boils down to fun police, but anyway, I don't want to go off on that tangent, but I hate those dispersions where morality is dictated by other people.
Yeah, well, I mean, morality should come from a sense of right and wrong, not from someone told you to do it. We actually can't move on from the news yet because we have to talk about our stock purchases.
Oh, yes.
So how's your stock? Damon texted me the day after we recorded episode 3, telling me that he had already made money on his random stock.
At the time, I was up by $9.10.
Where are you now?
I haven't looked because after I texted you, I thought, hey, wait a minute. We should always save this for the podcast, and I should just not look. And then, because if we're on a weekly schedule, then I thought, actually, and I'll propose this, and we can roll for it, or we can just act on it. But I thought we could review our stock, roll to sell or hold, and then I don't know. I don't know how far you want to take this game. I mean, I'm all in for whatever.
Yeah, I wanted to take it as far as let's roll for what stocks to buy, but we'll see what happens. I was just going to hold them and see if they.
Okay, let's just leave it there then. That's fine. I, as of right now, am down $3.78.
All right. Well, if you'll recall from episode 3, I rolled for 6 stocks, which I purchased, and every single one of them is down.
Oh,
and
Jesus.
Not a lot. I'm down
It's
a
not
total.
a great time to be playing this game.
I'm down a total of $12.83, which isn't a lot.
No, that's not bad.
Yeah, maybe the lesson from this is that rolling for stocks isn't the best idea. I mean,
wait, I'm sorry.
It's no different than gambling.
Yeah, and following the market trends is kind of bullshit too. But I mean, it's a fun thing. Like I'm
glad. I had fun doing it, and who knows, these stocks might turn around.
Yeah, and we can if you'd like in the future. We don't have to bowl. I mean, originally it was I would do it because I didn't want to volunteer your money for a game.
But I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm up for adventure.
I was actually thinking about it, and I had forgotten that when we went to St. Louis together, I did something very uncharacteristic. So, Misha likes to gamble. He likes to worship Fortuna. And we went to St. Louis for a hypnotism conference. And he wanted to go to the casino, and I said, I do not enjoy gambling. I do not enjoy gambling. I don't. Because I don't think the games are games of skill or chance. They're just games to get the casino money.
That's fair.
But we went to I said, you know what? I'm a good friend.
You are.
Let's do the thing you want to do. So we go there, and it kind of sucked, and there was kind of nobody there, and we tried playing the slots for a while, which was ridiculous because it was just a box of bling. I mean, my comparison was this is less understandable and exciting than recycling.
Well, I mean, slot machines are just machines that are designed psychologically to extract money from you and make you think you're having fun. Right.
But then I was like, I felt like I was being a little bitch because I kept whining about the stock machines and stuff like that. So I said, fuck it. And I pulled $100 out and went over the roulette wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened?
I don't recall.
I lost $100. Never won a single fucking thing.
Well, why'd you bet it all at once?
I didn't. We spread it out.
Oh.
We tried to play.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, I pulled out of my secret cash reserve $100 for the sake of entertaining.
Having a good story on a podcast later.
Sure, or just being a good friend. But because I'm notoriously cheap, and sometimes I try to remedy that. But anyway, I blew $100
in the name of friendship and worshiping Fortuna.
And succinctly proving a point.
Gambling is for fools.
Well, and also it was just us at the roulette wheel. And neither of us were very familiar with the rules or how to bet. And the dealer was kind of a dick and annoyed with us. You don't remember any of this?
Vaguely.
And then we had to walk back to the hotel.
I remember walking back. Yeah, that was annoying.
Yeah, that was... Always carry a compass. Because we kept using a building as a point of reference for how we were getting to where we were going. And then we realized that there was another building diametrically opposed from that building that we kept confusing it with. And we were actually walking around in a circle.
We walked around in a complete circle. Yep. Yeah. I'm going to roll for a topic for this episode. 5 is Random Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh.
The ball is in your court, Damon.
All right. No, we could talk about this. So, I forgot that was on the list and was not prepared, but I can do this out of my ass. So, a couple of years ago, I had a pretty regular D&D group, which I regretfully have not had since. But it's a pretty consistent group of at least 5, sometimes up to 8 people that would weekly on Saturdays play D&D, and I've been playing D&D since I was 10 years old. I mean, it's a great game. If you've never played it, you should really check it out. And by D&D, I mean any role-playing game that suits your fancy. If I had to pick a favorite, it would be Pathfinder. mostly because I'm a big fan of the D&D 3.5 rules. And that's an expansion of that with a focus on miniature tabletop-based combat and rules pertaining to that. And those are the things about the game that I enjoy. So anyway, but nobody wants to be Dungeon Master. Nobody. And
I beg to differ on that because there are people who definitely want to be Dungeon Master.
And those are the people that you don't want to be your Dungeon Master.
That doesn't mean they're a good Dungeon Master.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But in this group especially, nobody wanted to be DM. And I had kind of joined a group that had pre-existed for several years. And there was one member who was notoriously always the DM. And quite frankly, I didn't find him a very appealing Dungeon Master because he wasn't. One of the problems my thesis statement here is the problem with Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games is that it's too scripted.
Mm-hmm.
And there are not a lot of systems that I have experienced. I've read some, but that I've actually experienced hands-on that are an open sandbox type thing for obvious reasons. It's very difficult to play a game with a hardcore militant set of rules that define every possible interaction, but a loose, off-the-cuff script.
Like, for instance, your Dungeon Master sets up this campaign where you're asked to go deal with the brigands in the mountains and save the town, and maybe you don't feel like dealing with the brigands in the mountains. Maybe you want to go south and see what's happening at the river. And the Dungeon Master has to cajole you into like, oh, well, there's forest fire. You can't go south.
Yeah, it's a linear progression. And it's a linear progression for a reason, because that's something you can write a module for.
Right.
This isn't a computer program, you know. And so it's a script that the Dungeon Master has descriptions that he reads based on your roles and perception or whatever. And I just found that a little boring. It's still fun. I still enjoy it. But I wanted to take it to the next level. And so I proposed to the group. I said, I will Dungeon Master on the condition that it is improvisational. And I had done this once before with another group that I had to great effect, but not as dramatically. So that was a little bit more scripted. But for this group, what I did was I put together a map surrounded by mountains with several towns. So it's a closed sandbox, right? Wrote up some 1-paragraph descriptions for the political factions in the area, the towns in the area, the tribes, or whatever there were to play with. Mm. So I spent, a week kind of setting that stuff up. There's probably 2 pages worth of material, which is nothing for a D&D campaign. Yeah. And then I put together a set of tools on a laptop that I could have an initiative tracker, some predefined monster configurations, and I could somewhat randomly on the fly generate appropriate combat based on whatever situation arose very quickly using tools at my disposal. And that was all I prepared. Mm-hmm. So I had a subset of primary NPCs that were going to be in the story, no matter what happened, these were the main characters in the region. And then I literally let the players do whatever they wanted. And so they tested this. And one of the things that I decided early on was I was not going to fall into the Dungeon Master trap of it's me against the players. Mm-hmm. It's not. I am a translator from the collective imagination, or for the collective imagination. So I can dictate the effects or impact that actions have, but I came up with a kind of an on-the-fly way of doing that based on there's a concept in D&D called taking 20, and where you can say like the party has a generally as a whole has a generally low intelligence or they have a generally high perception. And you can kind of say, like, for any situation, the average DC based on what the average perception of the party is 12. And then you can make your own rolls for the party to keep the story moving instead of, because another problem that I have with the way role-playing games go is I say roll a perception check. You roll a dice and then you know you got a 2 and then I tell you something and you know it's shit.
Uh-huh.
But if you don't know, if I've built a mechanic fairly or somewhat ballparky fairly, right, assesses what the overall perception of the party is, and I roll against that, and that's just what the party observes, then I can ask somebody if they'd like to examine closer, and then let them have a roll, and then give them additional information only if they get a high roll.
Mm-hmm.
But then you don't have the situation where everybody rolled a 4, and they know they didn't see shit, and then I give them a description.
And they know there's something to see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it also prevents the whole situation where you're walking down a hallway. Everybody roll a perception check. Everybody rolls. Okay. So you keep walking down the hallway. And then, of course, the first thing a player goes is, well, wait a minute. I'd like to sit and examine this area a little bit longer. Because they know they rolled shit.
They know they failed their perception roll.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
which by itself gave them information that they shouldn't have.
Now, that being said, I would also false roll.
Mm-hmm.
So even if I didn't have something to roll on, I would periodically just roll a die. Just so there wasn't an indicator of importance.
This is like World War II cryptography level strategy that you're talking about here.
No, but it was...
Like I can't just roll for the things that I have to roll for. I also have to keep the party guessing about whether I'm rolling for something or not, or what I'm rolling for.
Well, it's an anti-metagame campaign, right? So the whole... I was going for free will and anti-metagaming. The other thing I did...
Break down for our listeners that term anti-metagaming.
Metagaming is when you are not thinking as your character, you're thinking as the player controlling the character. And like I gave a perfect example of it a minute ago. Everybody roll perception. Oh, well, wait, I think I'd like to stick around here a little bit longer. That's metagaming. I know there was a reason, there was something to look for here that I didn't see.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're walking down the street and you don't see something, you just keep walking.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are the things that I wanted to combat. I also wanted to combat min-maxing. And min-maxing is where you roll a character that is intentionally unbalanced in your favor.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a fighter, everything you have is in strength and you have like a 6 intelligence.
Uh-huh.
I am going to punish your intelligence. Even if you as a player...
But it's not you against the player.
No, it's not me against the player. It's to get me making them own their shit.
Honoring the rules of the game. Yeah.
So if you're a fucking moron, but you're actually an intelligent person, who are the people who metagame the most and who min-max the most, and it's abusing the system, you have to stay in character. If you're the guy who has no skills in knowledge, no skills in anything, it's all combat, you're not solving that puzzle, buddy.
Yeah.
And if you try, and even if you've got the right answer, you're gonna fuck it up. Because you're a moron. You're a fucking moron. You have a 3-year-old intelligence. You know, I mean, you are.
Are you calling all 3-year-olds morons?
No, but I'm saying that, like, if you have a 6 intelligence with the average being 10,
yeah,
and 8 being the minimum,
you couldn't pour water out of a boot with instructions on the heel.
Yeah. So as a player, and I actually pissed off some of the other people on the team. Or in the group with this, I had a character that I intentionally min-maxed, but I also made him mentally challenged.
Yeah.
So I would decide that, or actually I did it with rolls, but he would pick a thing because he thought he was really smart because he was stupid. Because the stupider you are, the smarter you think you are.
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yes. So we'd be in the middle of a thing, and the DM would drop something like, "Oh, you're searching the room and you find this silver dagger," and it was literally just a piece of loot, and I knew that metagaming. But I rolled And I applied my intelligence and I thought about it, and I decided, or my character decided, I should say, that this was the most important clue in the entire game. And that was the focus. And no matter what else came up, no, we need to get back to investigating this silver dagger. Which was a complete, unintentionally red herring. But stuff like that. And it's like, and because he was so strong and so powerful, he would pick fights with people, and it was obnoxious. It was very obnoxious, but he was also really great in combat. But also, if you've ever known somebody that's kind of a moron and really strong, that's how they fucking act.
Yeah.
So
how did you handle like rolling for things that weren't prepared?
Oh, yeah. So then it just turns into improv.
Mm-hmm.
So in the first couple sessions, the players try to test me, and they're like, oh, I can do anything I want? I'm like, yeah, just tell me what you want to do. And I said, but let me emphasize, there will be real-world consequences, if you do something fucking asinine. And so he goes, I shoot an arrow into the air. Well, now, if you've ever read the Kurt Vonnegut story, Dead-Eye Dick, it's a story of a kid who is frustrated one day, and he goes out on the roof, and he shoots a gun up into the air. And what goes up must come down. And it goes through the window of a second-story house 3 miles away and kills a woman who's vacuuming the floor, who's pregnant. And he is convicted, or he's put on trial for manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter. And so with that in mind, after a series of rolls, that arrow went up and it came down and went through a window and killed somebody. And
what are the chances?
Pretty high, really, if you think about it.
I don't think it would be that high.
I mean, I guess I was trying to prove a point at that point, too.
I just wanted you to admit it.
No, it's fair. It's fair. But, and I mean, I could talk about this for hours, and I won't, unless there's
Unless you email us and tell us you want to hear the rest of the story on Patreon. I can never say that word right. Patreon.
So anyway, this escalated to the point where at one point they went into a basement of a barn.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a root cellar. And based on rolls that I made, there happened to be a secret door there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, none of this was written down. It was just pure improv based. And I said, D20, 18, 19, 20, there's a secret door. And there was.
So every time they went anywhere or did anything, you just came up with some possibilities and rolled for it.
Correct.
Which requires a lot of quick thinking.
Yeah, and it's fun. I mean, I also like the challenge, right. But I ended up, by the end of the night, creating a series of tunnels that I mapped in my head without writing down and walked them through this, and I nailed it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that hard to do. I kept it simple. But they all knew what I was doing, and it made it more fun for everybody because they knew it was completely off the cuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it took the entire direction in a totally different place than it did. And I was able to actually utilize it to loop back to the story that they had derived so hard from.
Uh-huh.
But also I did things like one party who had been marching on the way to this elven village encountered a tomb, and I made it very clear that all of the markings on the tomb were elvish.
Mm-hmm.
And that, there was no consequences. They just got a ton of great loot when they robbed the tomb. They then walked into the elven village nearby, wearing the armor of the grandfather of the elder of the tribe. You know what I'm saying?
The troop of elves.
Yeah, the troop of elves. And they were quietly escorted into a holding chamber. Mm-hmm. Where they were actually tried for semi-war crimes, but I digress. But I could talk about this, but the point being that there are ways to utilize randomness to be extremely creative. And if there's something that bothers you about it, one thing your Xbox can't do is random reality. It can't improvise. And whether it's comedy or music or D&D, use those dice to put you on a path and own it and go where it leads you, and it's always fortuitous.
Always fortuitous. Yeah. It's a great alternative too to the tired old, like, we're just going to work through this module and do this linear story.
Exactly.
You have this other paradigm in which the characters literally can do anything and anything can arise, and a plot from that can even arise if they choose to stay the course and investigate the thing that comes up or whatever. It can turn into a plot, or if that's not a plot that they like, it can easily go in a different direction.
Absolutely.
To me, the best role playing is when it's collaborative storytelling between the players and the DM, instead of the DM just like doling out bits of this, like, oh, I'm just going to give you enough for you to do the tasks to unlock the next piece of the story that I will then tell you. You know, it's
still fun.
It's fun. It's great to have possibilities. And that's the ultimate message of random reality is the more possibilities you have, the more rich and robust your experience is going to be. And you could even hybridize these approaches too. You could work a module, and anytime the characters want to go off book, you improvise and let them. And if they make it back to the story, great. If they go off in a different direction, they have freedom in that way.
A previous campaign, what I did was I bought a module that I loosely followed. And at certain appropriate points, like going to a tavern and asking the barkeep what was up in the town or whatever, I also bought other like little short modules that were options available to the party. Because I thought about it like with video games, with like, there's DLC. There's DLC that interrupts the story and augments it, but is optional. And so I thought, that's fun when I'm playing a video game. Why wouldn't I want this in my tabletop game? Mm-hmm. But what I was going to say earlier was one of the side effects, once we shook off the rough patches of them embracing this thing that I was actually taking seriously, that they thought was kind of a joke, or they'd never experienced before, or it was started off kind of awkward. Once we did that, it actually got to the point where players started creating their own character arcs, and they started following their own character arcs that were congruent to the story, but it gave them the opportunity to write their own path and write their own journey. And it created some extremely robust storytelling that could never existed just from my mind, dictated to the players. And I always embraced their creative decisions, especially if they were immersive and embracive of the scenario. I would create things that would enhance the thing. I would yes and them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a good time, and it's fun to talk about. I could talk about it for a very long time, which I kind of already have, but hopefully somebody listening to this can incorporate this into their game.
Yeah, and feel free to email us with more questions, or if you want to ask for some more from Damon, or even suggestions, or report back, like try it out and report back how it goes.
Yeah, tell us how you're doing.
We'd love to hear from you guys. I think we should rein it in and issue forth a listener challenge.
Sure.
What do you think? I've got an idea.
Okay.
We have 6 topics that somebody could create. I wanted it to be roughly related to role playing, but not like actually like you have to go out and find a role playing group and get a game and stuff like that. It's kind of a big commitment, but just something that'll give you a little taste for the flavor of this. 6 different topics to have you come up with a scenario, or if you want to write it as a short story, or you don't even have to write it out, but just come up with the idea for
Synopsis.
Something like this.
Story outline.
But what you're going to do is get your 6-sided die and roll, dear listener, roll for which one of these you're going to do. Number 1 would be a character story, where you come up with 2 characters and characterize them as, maybe they're brave, or they're sarcastic, or they're what kind of like person are they? Come up with like just some characters that you might use in a role-playing situation. Try to flesh them out a little bit. What are they like? Number 2 would be the location challenge. Create an idea for an unusual location that adventurers could adventure in. And you can get do this as much or as little as you want. If you just want to like, just think like, oh, I'm just going to like come up with a random location and think of a couple details.
Into your mom's vagina.
Or I don't recommend that one. Please don't eat your mammy's vagina. Don't do that.
I didn't say that. I said descend into it.
Because you're going to face plant at some point. Anyhow, number 3, if you roll a 3, you're going to come up with a dialogue. Get a random phrase or a word that you can incorporate into a dialogue between some characters. If you roll a number 4, you are going to do a role reversal where you have come up with like an idea of like a hero and a villain or like enemies or something like that who are forced to like take on each other's role. Like the villain ends up having to save somebody and the hero does something.
Or, from that same perspective, villains think they're heroes.
Good ones do. Well-written ones do.
No, I mean, historically, like Hitler thought he was a great guy.
I don't know if
I would not agree with that. I'm not a proponent of Hitler or anything that has to do with him. He's just the automatic meme answer to every question.
I mean, he must have thought that what he was doing was right and valuable, or he wouldn't have done it.
Correct.
Yeah, what a fuckwad.
I honestly believe that there has not ever been a person that intentionally wishes to cause harm to others.
That's not true.
I think
there are psychopaths and sadists out there who deliberately want to fuck other people's shit up.
But not...
Those people exist. I agree with your basic premise, but I'm going to call you on that.
Right,
there are
I'm not...
psychopaths and sadists out there. And if you are one of them, email us at youraleatoricreality@gmail.com and tell us what it's like to be in that. You can email us anonymously. Just, tell us a little bit what it's like.
I think ultimately most... Let's not talk about the corner cases, okay? There's fucking crazy people out there. But most people, regardless of how you may perceive their actions or beliefs, they think they are trying to be a good person.
Did Pol Pot think he was trying to be a good person?
It's corner case. Don't corner case me.
All right. Okay.
Corner case, anything less than 20%.
All right. Number 5 is a mystery object. Come up with some strange artifact that could be the catalyst to a quest or an adventure. And if you roll a 6, I want you to define a conflict, a misunderstanding, a betrayal, a battle, a thwarted villain who thinks he's doing good, whatever. You come up with a conflict premise for some type of adventure. See where it takes you. Maybe it's just a thought experiment. Maybe you write a short story. However you choose to express that, listener, the choice is yours.
And also, to be clear, and I think I can speak for both of us on this, although we haven't discussed it, I think it's just implied. We issue these challenges not as a way to engage you, but we're genuinely interested in people who would like to explore this and participating in it with them. And if you're really into it and you have some cool ideas, we'd love to have you on the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I anticipate us having like live events.
Oh, absolutely.
Where we have like a con where people come and we all do all kinds of random stuff together.
Yeah,
that'll be a lot of fun.
This is not lip service. This is genuinely us seeking our engagement. Participate in this with us. We would like to hear how you feel about this. There's very few people that we've encountered that have taken this to any level that we have. And one of the reasons why we are doing this podcast is to find like-minded individuals.
Find your people. That's right. That's what we're doing right now. We're finding our people. So if you are our people, please get in touch. We want to talk to you on the show. We want to do random stuff and give you prizes. Well, that bit was marked. With that, we're going to close with the random quote. I have random.org here. We have 224 pages in this book. I'm using the same book again, but there's lots of quotes in here.
Book is awesome.
We're going to have to switch book, periodically. I'm not going to always get topics out of this book, but it's an improvement from the other quote sites that I was using. It's an actual book. So I've got a number here from 1 to 224. The number I got is 63. So I turn to page 63 in the book, and I see, other than the ones that are cut off, I see 6 quotes here. So I'm going to just roll a 6er.
Cool.
I got a 4. 4. Okay, it's one of the longer ones, but that's okay. Speaking generally, mankind can be divided into 2 groups, authoritarians and libertarians. The first believe in making people good. The second believe in letting people be good. The first believe in compelling others to conform to their wishes. The second thinks it better to convince than to compel. And that is from Liberty and the Great Libertarians. I think that's a great illustration of what you said about all the villains think that they are good guys. Because I think authoritarians and libertarians both might be falling short of that goal.
I'm not going to speak on politics right now.
I meant libertarians in the philosophical sense and not the political party.
I prefer to believe that everybody wants to be a good person. Some people are just bad at it.
Well, in NLP, they say everyone does the best they can with the information they have available to them and the skills that they have available to them.